Good morning. Good morning. I love each and every one of you. And maybe I just met you for the first time, and that might be weird, but that's okay. I'm okay with the uncomfortableness of it. I'm still going to love you anyway, no matter what. And this topic of love is a really deep topic. It moves people to fight, and it moves people to forgive. But I really like to look at the idea of what is love. If the infinite one, if God were really love, what would that look like? I used to toy with this whenever I was a child. I went to this church at the time that taught me two very confusing things. One, on one hand, God is love. On the other hand, God is judgmental. And to me, those two things did not get along. They do not make sense. How can God be love and how can God be judgmental? Well, as I've learned through time, the truth is God is love. If God is love, then there is no judgment. And for me, that was a topic that was a big one to take. Well, what does that mean if there's no judgment? What does that mean if somebody harms another? What does that mean if somebody does something that I perceive as wrong? There's only love. And what does that mean for me? It means that I had to take my box of what I thought God was, and I had to put it aside, and I had to get a bigger box. But I realized that my box still isn't big enough. Because if I really, really get that idea, then I recognize that the infinite one, when it means infinite, that means it's everywhere present, and it would be here in me, which would mean that I would be non-judgmental. And that's a lie. Because I do. I don't always want to, but I recognize that. That's part of our human condition, is that we judge and perceive. And again, we want to put things in boxes. We want to have that, everything fit pretty, but it doesn't. Life is a little messy and it doesn't fit pretty. It's complicated. And the more I open myself up to remove the walls, to allow myself to see with a greater heart, then I start seeing people with new eyes. I missed you all last week, by the way. I hope Marcia did a really good job, my friend Marcia Bencala. Yay, I love her a lot. She used to be my neighbor. And the beautiful thing about Marcia is that when we were neighbors, I had taught this prac class, and I had this group of practitioners that went through when I was at San Jose Center. And there was one woman, her name was Dawn, and Dawn found out that she had cancer. And Marcia decided to be Dawn's ending place, like her home. She offered up her home for Dawn to lead the last couple of months of her life. And she was across the street from me. And so we had this beautiful experience while Dawn was going through this process of leaving her body, which wasn't a pretty process, by the way. It was very, very awkward and painful and challenging for Dawn. But Marcia offered this place for Dawn's family to come and grieve and make amends and create forgiveness for what they had done to each other. And Marcia just held this space of love. And it's not an easy thing to hold a space of love, especially whenever people are going through that kind of process. A lot of feelings come up, and there's some mean things that are said because people don't know how to cope with grief, or how to say something to somebody who you're not going to see for very much longer in the physical form. And it's not something that we're taught. Sometimes you are. Maybe you'll go through a chaplaincy program, or you have some kind of church or a spiritual center where you're taught that. But really, in real life, we're not taught how to do that, how to go through that kind of grief or sorrow and do it with love. In the Science of Mind textbook, it says, "Through the prism of God's love, I recognize the oneness of God and man. Through Through the prism of God's love, I recognize the oneness of God and man. And for me, I would say human, or men and women. But it's okay. The Science of Mind textbook was written in the 30s, and man meant everybody at that time. So now we're using the words human. But I think about God like I think about a diamond. And I think about us like a diamond. So each one of us is a facet on the diamond. Each one of us has our own unique edges, our own unique, colors. The light comes through in a different way, but we're all connected. We don't feel like we're all connected sometimes. Sometimes we do. But when we really get it, we get that I'm just looking into another facet of me. I'm looking into another facet of me. I'm looking into another facet of me. And that's whenever I start getting what love really means. Whenever you're stepping into the way of being that is hurtful or harmful to me, and I look into you and I see, how am I like that? At what time in my life have I done that? And I don't know about you, but I've done some really, I would judge them to be stupid or not very good things in my life. But that doesn't mean that I have to live from those points. It doesn't mean I have to get caught into that. What it does mean is those points in my life, they can be the catalyst for me to understand what love means. Not only everybody else on the planet, but myself. I mean, I got a DUI once. And there's a part of myself I recognize. We had this weekend, this last weekend, I was planning Sister Spirit. And in Sister Spirit, what we do is we decide, the dream team, the planning team, we decide to get everything we would ever want in our dream retreat. And we would dream it up and create it. And that's what we do. And part of our dream retreat would be looking inside and finding those places that we need to look at and really shining the light on them, even the dark places. So that's what we did this last weekend. We did together. We looked at some of those places. And for me, it was a place where I got my DUI. It was like 10 years ago. And when I shone the light on that, I realized that I don't love myself because of it. There was a place of me that I hadn't forgiven myself. Somebody else, they come to me, I'm like, well, that happens. We have hard times. And I can love them through that. But how come there's a part of me where I don't love myself? And that's what I really had to look at. And that's where I'm stepping into the idea that that time in my life was a time for me to start loving more deeply. And this time in my life is the time to start loving myself more deeply. Saint Valentine. There's a lot of stories about this guy. But there's one that I picked out that's my favorite. It's kind of funny because there's actually 3 Saint Valentines, and they were all killed on the same day, on February 14th. It's kind of a mystery. But the most famous one is this gentleman. He's first called Valentinus, and around 270, 278 AD, somewhere in that period, because it was a long time ago, we really don't know. He was a really great guy. He was a priest, wonderful priest, Catholic priest. And Claudius II was this amazing emperor. And what he did is he conquered a lot of different places. And he had this amazing army. And he loved his army so much because he wanted them to be winning. But he cared more about the winning than he did about anything else. And what he recognized is people didn't want to leave their homes to be in an army. They wanted to be with their families. They wanted to be with their wives and children. And so he made a decree. Nobody's going to get married in his empire. That'll solve it all, right? No marriage allowed. You can't get married. That way, if people aren't attached or connected to somebody, well, then they won't mind going out to fight. Well, Valentine decided this was not such a good idea. And so secretly, he went and married couples because he was such a rebel. The rebel marrier. Well, Claudius, later became known as Claudius the Cruel, Claudius found out that Valentine was marrying people, and he decided to sentence him to death. But first, he wanted him to be in prison for a while, then he wanted to torture him, and then he wanted to behead him, just because it was way more fun that way. So while he was in prison, the jailer knew about this guy, and he knew he was a great teacher, a wonderful man, and he wanted Valentine to teach his daughter. And so the jailer brought his daughter in, and Valentine ended up teaching the daughter, and they fell in love. So the day comes, February 14th, of course, when Valentine is to be executed. And he is. He's executed. But he leaves a letter for the daughter, and he signs it, "Your Valentine." And that story, and later on they made him a saint, of course. The Catholic Church made him a saint. But the story lives on. Now, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, who knows? But the fact is that this man stood for love. He stood for love in spite of everything, in spite of the fact that he could be killed, in spite of the fact of what people are doing in the world. It didn't matter to him. It mattered more that love was the most important thing. What if you made love the most important thing in your life? And I mean on a deep level. Like, what if you loved yourself as the most important thing? See, that's what I'm learning. I'm learning how to love myself at a deeper level. In those places where I think are the dark spots, and the places where I don't want to look, what does unconditional love look like? Well, that's exactly what it looks like, is loving those spots that are uncomfortable, the spots that we don't necessarily love. I'm reading a book of the month. This month is called Bringers of the Light. It's one of the 3 books we're using at Sister Spirit, by the way. So we'll have a little bit information. I'm hearing like a little bzz, bzz. Anybody getting a call? Yes, God, no. So Bringers of the Light, it's this book, we're one of the books, this is the book of the month, it's called Bringers of the Light. I brought it, but I didn't bring it up here. And it's about being the light in the world. And in the book, there's a short story. It says, one day, a man stopped his car at the corner of a friendly street. Oh, here it is. Why, thank you, lovely Vanna Maria. Bringers of the Light. I really recommend that you get this. It's so short. It's like a super short book. And did you notice how much highlighting I have in it? I have a lot of highlighting. And at the end of this month, we're going to do a play shop focused on this book. So on the 28th, we'll have some actual activities during the service time that are some of the activities in the book. In the book, again, is a story. One day, a man stopped his car at the corner of a friendly street in a friendly town and motioned to a friendly person standing nearby. "Excuse me," the driver said, "but I seem to be lost. Could you kindly give me directions?" "Well, certainly, sir. Where would you like to go?" And then the driver said, "Well, I don't know." So the man said to him, "Sir, how can I give you directions unless I know where you're trying to go?" But isn't this our life? You see, God is a great GPS. Global positioning system, or a God purpose system. God purpose system. We have the ability to get, do, be whatever we want. However, we don't declare what our purpose is in life. So what if the purpose of your life was to be love? What would that look like? What if the purpose of your life was to be something instead of to do something? To be forgiving of the vacuum cleaner upstairs. To be forgiving of everything that's going on around us. So I wonder, I know, I love that. Usually they vacuum at 8 p.m. at night whenever I have my classes at that time, so I usually put a break at 8 p.m. But today, apparently not. That's because it's Valentine's Day. We want to get things done early today. We got places to go, things to do, right? So what if in your life, your purpose was how you were going to be in life? Now, that's great to think about, but how do you really take that on? It reminds me of Amy Beale. Do you guys remember Amy Beale? 1992. There was a Stanford student named Amy Beale. She's a Fulbright scholar, amazing, amazing student. Her mission was to end the apartheid in Africa. And so she got a Fulbright scholarship to go to Africa for a year and to study and to figure out their political system to see how she can make an impact, especially with the rights of women. Africa at that time was severely separated between whites and blacks. And the white people, most of them in Africa, were the ones who were creating the authoritarian rule. Now, she was a white person, of course, here in America, going over there to figure out how to make things different. She had a dream of believing in a better Africa. Her last day in Africa, there was this huge political mob that had happened, and she was driving through a city when this mob happened. It was a huge group of African men, huge group of African men, and they noticed this white woman who looked very well-dressed in this car driving by, and they started throwing rocks at the car, breaking the windows, and soon she got out of the car and she started running for her life. They were throwing stones at her, and eventually somebody got her and stabbed her. And she died. And they thought that she was from the other side, but she was really somebody who was there also on a mission. That was their mission. But they were too ground up in hatred and anger for what they'd been through to even see or be willing to be open to that. In this angry mob, 4 gentlemen were convicted of this murder. Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, had an idea about the prison systems, that there's always hope, that people can find reconciliation, that there can be forgiveness made, and that people can change. Although they were sentenced to 18 years in prison, at 5 years of their sentence, they recognized of what they had done. They found out that they had murdered somebody, basically in cold blood. Somebody who was at the same heart, working for the same thing that they were, but in a peaceful way. And when they went through this hearing where they had the ability to actually get out of jail early. And the family, Amy Beale's family, was invited to this hearing. And each of those young men went up to the family and they said, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I've done. Would you please forgive me?" And Amy Beale's parents said, "Yes, we do forgive you." And interestingly enough, they said, we come to South Africa as Amy came, in a spirit of committed friendship. And make no mistake about it, exchanging a hand of friendship in a society which has been systematically polarized for decades is hard work at times. One of the gentlemen said, his name was Notobeko, he said that when we forgave him, he didn't care if he got amnesty because he had just been freed. They all 4 won pardons in 98. And the gentlemen, 2 of the gentlemen started nonprofits, and so did the Beale family. The Beale family recognized that it was a system that was creating this. It wasn't the people who did it. It was the system, and the system had to be changed. So they started a nonprofit organization in South Africa that still goes on today, providing 15 programs for youth in order for them to feel like they're loved, feel a part of something. It teaches art and drama. It teaches musical instruments. It teaches theories of how to get better in life. And so these young people, instead of resulting to violence because it's the only thing they know how to do, they're now resulting into education, into finding out new solutions, into making a change through that way. And 2 of those young men work for this agency now, for this nonprofit. Can you forgive somebody who murdered your daughter? If the Beale family could do that, what could you do? What could you do? Maybe there's a resentment that you're holding on to. What if you let it go? What if you let it go within you? And what if you let it go for that other person? When you forgive, it's because you're forgiving yourself. You're giving yourself for a greater good, for love. So I want to encourage you to think about that on this Valentine's Day. What does love really mean? What does it mean for you? And who can you be in this world? Because I'm going to be love in all areas, in that agape, unconditional, no judgmental kind of way. And I will step into that in a greater and greater degree to the best of my ability. And I know it may not be easy, and I might have to give up some parts of myself that I've been holding on to. And I'm willing to do that work because it's important, because this world needs it. Are you willing to do that too? Yeah, let's do it. I love you all.